What's up guys, Andre here, and today I'd like to show you how you can log in with third-party services using Laravel Socialite. This is going to be a part of my premium course, so if you like this video, definitely sign up at usefullaravelpackages.com. Let's take a look at Laravel Socialite. Socialite lets you use third-party services like GitHub and Twitter to log into your application. You see this across several web apps out there where there are extra options for logging in using these third-party services. This makes the experience better for the user as they don't need to create a new account. So Socialite supports Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google, GitHub, and Bitbucket. But there are additional providers here if you go to this website. If you need these providers, these additional ones, there's a lot of them here. For this example, we're just going to use GitHub because GitHub is the easiest to use. All right, so I have a Laravel application scaffolded out here, and all I've done is added my database credentials here. And I'm also going to do a PHP artisan make auth so we can scaffold out the authentication. And now if I refresh, we get the ability to log in and register. And let's make sure my database is migrated. Okay, so that should work. Let's just double check that that actually works. So it's going to make one here. Password. And okay, so it does work. Let me just reset that. Migrate fresh. Okay. So let's go into the docs and get started. So the first thing we need to do is composer require it. Okay, that's done. Let's go into here. Okay. So let's put this in our config services, like it says here. I'm just going to copy this. And like I said, we're going to be using GitHub. So let's go into our code, config services, and let's add that section for GitHub. And I'm going to we'll set this in a second. We'll just leave that for now. Let me just make some environment variables for these two. So back to our environment variables down here. And then for the other one as well, GitHub client secret. So we need a client ID and a client secret that we'll get from GitHub in a second. You can also put this in your environment if you want, but I'll just leave it here since this is the way it's defined. Save this. All right, what's next? Let's go into here and let's make actually let me log out here. Let's make a button here for logging in with GitHub. So let me just go into, I think it's login. Yep. And what's it called? It's called login. Forgot. Okay, let's make another one here called, let's not make it a submit button because that's already in use by this one. Let's just call this login with GitHub. GitHub. All right, see how that looks? Okay, that's fine. Actually, let me put a little GitHub icon here. I have this set up in my other project here, so I'm just going to paste it in. And it's just an SVG. So it's just a span with an SVG. And some margin on the right. Let's see how that looks. Okay, looks pretty good. And this actually has to be in anchor tag because it's going to go to a redirect link. So I'm just going to change this. Let's leave that empty for now and change it to an anchor tag. Cool. Okay, now let's go into GitHub and make an application there. So I'm logged in as my GitHub user here. And if you just go click on your profile and go to settings, there's a section here for developer settings. And let's make a new OAuth application. I'm just going to call it Socialite example. As you can see, I already did this. And for the home page, you can put whatever. I'm just going to put my course site here. Example description here. And the callback URL, we will change this in a second. I'll just put it to this for now. So you can register this. And here you see the client ID and the client secret. So we need these two pieces of information. And I'm going to go back into my environment file, client ID, and client secret. Okay. Now let's go back here into the docs and let's see what's next. Okay, so it says to add these two methods in our login controller. And one is responsible for redirecting the user to the OAuth provider, in our case GitHub, and the other is responsible for receiving the callback after we're authenticated. Okay, so let's grab these two methods. Grab this, and this goes in login controller. So login controller right here, and I'm just going to put it underneath here. And as you can see, it's defaulting to GitHub here, or it's just hard-coded. If you had more than one, then you would have to accept a parameter, provider, or something like that. Same with this here, but we're just going to use GitHub, so this is fine. All right, what's next? Okay, so obviously we have to set up some routes in our routes file. So let's grab this, and this corresponds to these two methods that we just pasted in. So let's go into our routes web, and let me paste that in. Okay, and here you can see the default callback URL, which is what we need to define in both GitHub and our application. So I'm just going to grab this. Let's go back into our services, and right here, I'm just going to do ULP Laravel Socialite .test / that. Okay, obviously this is going to change when it's in production, but for testing we can just leave it here. Actually, it's probably better to put it as an environment variable, because in testing you'll have something different from production. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to do this. Let's call it GitHub callback. Okay, I'm going to grab this, and let's go back to our environment. Let's do GitHub callback, and let's paste that in. Okay, and let's go into our GitHub and set it there as well. GitHub here, and let's set this. And obviously this would change in production. Okay, let's update this. And this should work now. Let me just go into my callback for a second. So in here, right here, let's just die and dump the user. And actually, I'm going to rename this to GitHub user, because when it comes back, it's the GitHub user, and let's just die and dump that. Sorry, I forgot the $. And let's see if this works. Oh, we forgot one step. We need to also set the redirect to /login/GitHub. So if we go into our blade file right here, the button. So we can just do that. Or you can use the URL helper if you want. I'll just leave it like this. And yeah, let's see if... So yeah, that's correct. If you look in the bottom left here, Socialite not found. Let's fix that. import. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so here is where the two apps are communicating. So they give each other access to access each other's information. So if you're not logged into GitHub, you'll be presented with a login, but I am logged in, and all I have to do is authorize it. And then once I do, it will hit that callback URL, and in there we can do whatever we like. And right now we're just dying and dumping the GitHub user that's coming back. And there we go. All this information is my GitHub information. And at this point, we're going to want to add this user to our own database. So if we go into here, right here, we're going to want to add user to database. And we want to log in the user. Okay, so let's add this user to the database. So I'm going to make a new variable called user. And I'm just going to do the create method. So I'm going to do user create. Let's make sure to import user. This one. And let's go ahead and add. Let's start with the email. It's going to be, so this is the GitHub user coming back. As you can see, we have the fields we need here. So GitHub user email. So we can just do GitHub user email. Actually, we should use the getter method instead of the field directly. I think you can do it this way, but if you look at the docs, yeah, let's make use of the getter method. So it's just get email like this. And then the name is GitHub user get name. And we can store the username as well. That would be the nickname in this case, but I'm not going to do that. And we also have to store the provider and the provider ID. So let me show you what I mean. So the provider ID, in our case, it's just the GitHub ID because we're just using GitHub. So that would be this ID here, which is pretty much my user ID in GitHub. So we have to store that as well. So just name it provider ID, and that would be GitHub user get ID. And like I said, if we were using multiple providers, then we need to store another column called provider, and this would be either Twitter or GitHub or whatever provider you're using. But since we're only using GitHub, I am not going to do that. Okay, so we also want to log the user in. So let's go ahead and do that. All we have to do is use the auth facade and log in. It's the user. We can set this to true. That's just the remember me property. And we import auth facade. And we don't need this. Let's redirect. So return redirect. We have a property here called redirect to. We can just make use of that. You can change that to whatever you like, but the default is home. So let's do this. Redirect to, and that should do it. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to go back. Let's go back one more. Let's refresh. Okay, let's try again. I forgot to take out the DD. Let's get rid of that. Okay, let's go back. And let's log in. And yes, we have an issue here. I forgot to allow password to be nullable. So yeah, let me just show you what I mean. Here we're not specifying the password because that's the whole point of using a different provider to log in, is not to make our own password and just use another service. So we need to make that nullable. So if you go into database, migrations, users, let's just make the password nullable right here. And yeah, we also have to specify a field for the provider ID. So let's do that after the password. Let's just duplicate that. Provider ID. Provider ID, right? Yeah, provider ID. And let's make that nullable as well. And we also have to remember to allow that here. So provider ID. And let's do a PHP artisan migrate fresh. Okay, let's try this again. Let's go back a few. Log in with GitHub. And there you go. So since I already authorized it the last time, it didn't do it again. And it went through. Let's check our database actually. We just refresh this. There's our users, and there I am. Cool. And it automatically logged me in because we specified that auth login facade right here. But let me show you an issue we'll run into if we try logging in again. So since that user already exists, it's going to go through that code again, but it's going to try to create that user, which already exists. So it's going to be an error. There you go. Duplicate entry for that email address, which already exists. So we have to check for that. Right before this, we got to check if this user already exists. So let's do that right here. Let me just remove this. Let's do user where GitHub ID equals GitHub user get ID. And let's grab the first one. So if it exists right here, grab it. If it doesn't exist, then create it. So if it doesn't exist, so if not user, then do this stuff, create it. And that should do the trick. So let's go back. Let's refresh this, log in with GitHub. I'm sorry, did I use GitHub ID instead of provider ID? Yes, sorry, provider ID. One more time. Log in with GitHub. There you go. It worked that time, and because it found the original user, so it didn't try to create a new one. Cool. And this totally still works with the original registration and login flow. So if you wanted to register the traditional way, you can still do that. Say blah. Actually, let me show you that. There's validation on this. So if you try to register and you're already registered with the same email address, this should catch it. Let's see. Let's double check. I think it should say that it already exists. And it does, cool. But if you want to create a totally new account, we can do that the old way. And yeah, so it totally works. You can use either GitHub or just plain old email. So there you have it, guys. We've managed to integrate a GitHub login into our own web app using Socialite. You can do the same for other services, although I find GitHub to be the easiest these days. For Twitter, you need to sign up and be approved for a developer account. And for Google, I kind of find their UI to be really difficult to navigate, to find the client ID and the secret key. But nonetheless, that's the only pieces of information you need, and you pretty much do the same thing that I showed you here. If you haven't already, please sign up for my premium course where I'll be taking a look at other packages similar to this one. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one. Okay, thanks. Bye.